Hello everyone, it's Benny, and welcome back to a very special update video. And I'll be getting to that in just a moment. But first off, for the people who just come to see these, to know what's the next thing I'm going to do that's not just another update video, my current plan is the next thing is probably going to be another Dare Engine livestream, because I still want to experiment with that before I return to the 3D Physics Engine series. So that's my plan. I'm going to start doing more Dare Engine live streams so that I can move back into the 3D Physics Engine series. And that'll start whenever I have more time for that, which should probably be next week. Also, we have a bit of news for once. Apparently, my YouTube channel has become big enough that they have featured an article about it on the front page of OpenGL.org, which seriously surprises me. I'll be completely honest. I know I have all these big figures on my channel. It's not that big, but I know I have some numbers behind my channel and whatnot, but I don't know. In my mind, I've always been this sort of smaller channel, just teaching a small group of people about a specialized subject. So, I don't know, that kind of surprises me that it's apparently important enough to be on the front page of OpenGL.org. And yeah, so just thought I'd share that with you guys. But the real thing that I'm making this update video about is because I'm trying something a little bit different. As you may know, when I'm not recording videos, I spend a lot of time just preparing material for series that I'm eventually going to do. And some of the most common questions I get asked are related to that process, like, "Hey Benny, how on earth do you learn all these things that you teach in your tutorial series?" For instance, single most common question I get asked other than, "Hey Benny, why is my code not working?" So I figured, you know what, let's do a bit of a behind-the-scenes thing, so I can show you what I really do behind the scenes to prepare for upcoming series. And I'm going to be doing this with the audio series, which no word at all on when that's going to be coming up, but I've only recently started preparing for it. So I figured this would be a reasonably accurate representation of how I prepare for a series pretty much from the ground up. And if people are interested in this, maybe I'll do a few more videos on this sort of thing. So let's go ahead and let's get into it. So, how do I prepare for a new video series? The first thing I do is a purely mental step. I don't touch a computer during this step. I don't touch pencil and paper. In fact, a lot of the times I'll just go on a walk while I do this because it's purely mental. And what that is I figure out what my goal is, what I'm trying to achieve in the series. And then I make a mental map of what I need to know and do in order to achieve that goal. So, for instance, in the audio series, what am I going to try to achieve in this series? I know it has something to do with audio, but what specifically do I want to do? And ultimately, my initial goal is I want to show people how to create an audio engine that's general purpose. It can be used in a 3D game engine, or really any game engine, but it's general purpose, so you could use it in a digital audio workstation or some other audio program if you want. And I want to be able to play multiple sounds at once. I want to be able to at least easily support multiple formats of sound, so it doesn't really care if we're using FLAC files or MP3 files or some new audio file that hasn't been invented yet. So I want that to be general there as well. And possibly also support a few more fancy effects, like audio filters and equalization, compression, stuff like that. And that's my initial goal. Now, the final series might not actually do all that. This goal might change over time, but that's initially what I'm going to try and go for. And throughout the course of my preparation, I'm going to figure out exactly how feasible that is. Now, the second part of that is figuring out the mental map of how I'm going to achieve that goal. How am I going to learn how to do all these things and how to get good working code that does this? And this starts with just what background knowledge do I have in this subject. And in the case of audio, I have some background knowledge. I understand a lot of the concepts of digital audio, just from making so many videos, and working with the audio in that, and also just some personal screwing around, just for fun. So, I understand a lot of the concepts behind digital audio. I know how filters work. I know how equalization and compression works. I understand all that sort of. I understand how audio synthesis works even. I understand a lot of the concepts behind audio. I've just never actually written code to do it before. So in my mind, that's a next to ideal scenario. Because my mental map of how to get there is just, I know the concepts, just figure out how to code it. And that's next to ideal because, in my experience, if you really understand the concepts behind something, then writing code for it or doing more advanced things with it really isn't an issue. And that's one of the reasons why in my tutorial series I tend to spend so much focus on how the concepts work. Because, like I said, in my experience, if you really understand how the concepts work, then you can do just about anything you want with it. It doesn't matter that, oh, this is in C++ and not Java, or, oh, I need to use it for something other than a 3D game. Because if you really understand the concept, it's generally applicable. But, I don't know. I'm getting distracted. So, anyways, after I have my goal and my mental map of how I'm going to achieve that goal, my next big concern is feasibility. I mean, my goal sounds great in my head, but it really doesn't matter how great it sounds if it's completely infeasible and it's going to take me the rest of my life to do it in a video series. So, that's when I actually start getting into code and start figuring out, okay, how much of this stuff is feasible to do in a video series? How much of this stuff actually works in a reasonable amount of code? And since I've never written code for this before, here's sort of how I approached that. The first thing is I googled how to play an audio file with SDL. I found some code on the internet, copied and pasted it into a new C++ project, and there you go. Nothing fancy to how I discovered that. I just got some basic code to get me started, to see how you can use a library like SDL to do some of the stuff I'm interested in. So for instance, here is that code, just blatantly ripped from Google, on playing a basic audio clip of my voice. Hello everyone, this is Benny from the past, and you are hearing an audio clip played by a computer program. That's right, just basic program to play an audio file. And I have some extra code here that I'm going to talk about in a moment, but yeah, the code looks a little bit like this. It's a simple call to load the file and delete it, simple call to play it, simple call to open and close audio devices, and the callback function is also pretty simple. We're just copying the audio from our, what's it called? From the data in the audio file into the audio stream that's actually being played. So overall, it's feasible. At least playing audio is feasible. It's not too difficult, it doesn't take a lot of code, it's not too mind-bending, so good, that passes the feasibility test. So, at this point, I've proven that playing an audio file is a feasible topic for a series on audio. But that doesn't prove the rest of my goal is feasible. So, at this point, I need to try and prove some other part of it. And generally, I like to try and prove the part that's, I think, will be simplest to prove. And you'll see why that is in a moment. So I decided to go ahead and try and prove that synthesis is a feasible topic. And the reason for that is synthesis ultimately stems from sine, saw, triangle, and square waves. So really, if I can write working functions for those, then I've essentially proven that, yeah, it could be a feasible topic. I need to do more eventually, of course, but it would prove enough to get me started. So that's what I went for. I created this play beep function that's based on the original play audio file function. A little bit different since this is playing a generated sound rather than a recorded sound that we loaded from a file. But it's generally the same, and a lot of this information came from SDL's documentation. And at this point, I needed to write a new callback, so I wrote this function. And, whoops, sorry. I thought a different function was right above it, but no. Yeah, so I just wrote a different function. All it's doing is it's going through the audio stream I'm supposed to be writing to, and writing a sine wave to it. So how do I generate a sine wave? Well, this is where I got something from Google again. And Google gave me this function for generating a sine wave. You need this magical frequency counter variable, which is always incremented by frequency every time the sine wave is called. And you take the sine of this magical frequency counter variable times 2 pi divided by sample rate, and the sine of that times the volume gives you the appropriate sine wave at the appropriate frequency and volume and sample rate. And if you run, it works. But I don't know about you, but when I first saw this, I had no idea how it worked. So what do I do here? Because this is a scenario I encounter a fair bit. I'll need to do something, I'll find working code for it, but I'll have no idea how that code actually works. And the way I like to do it, for something simple like this, is sort of almost like mathematical induction in a way. I'll assume that the code does work, which it does, and then I'll try to prove it works for something else. So in this case, I tried to prove it worked for a square wave, because if I essentially clamp the sine wave to, if it's above 0, it returns volume. If it's less than 0, otherwise return negative volume. That should generate a square wave. And if I comment out this function... Oh, right. I also need to actually play the square wave. Excuse me, that was another sine wave. So if I do that, then I've proven that this works. I can generate a square wave with this technique as well. And once I've proven that, I can sort of work backwards and take out the parts that aren't necessary for the square wave and figure out what they're doing. So for instance, I factored out the 2 pi here because I discovered that's only necessary for, well, for satisfying the sine function. So I factored that out, and still works. So then I decided to try a different approach. I tried writing an approach from the ground up and comparing it to, well, the one I have now. And my insight for this, whoops, sorry, I just jumped to a completely different place in code. My insight here was that frequency is periods per second, sample rate is samples per second, so sample rate over frequency is the number of samples I need for every period of the wave. So here I just increment frequency counter by 1, I do frequency counter modulus the samples per period, and if I'm over halfway through the period, if I'm over halfway through the number of samples per period, I return the volume, otherwise I return negative volume. And this also works, but it's actually slightly off because this is doing integer arithmetic instead of floating point arithmetic. So what I did was my key insight here was, what's the big difference here? In this time, everything's working by frequency rather than 1. So if I multiply this equation by frequency, then all of a sudden I'm doing frequency counter modulus sample rate. I'm adding frequency every time, and what do you know, that's quite a bit like what I was doing with the sine wave. And that's sort of how I reverse engineered how does that work, because this also works. And it doesn't have the error anymore because it's doing, well, it's keeping track of the error because it's doing everything in terms of frequency rather than truncating it with division. So yeah, and that's how I sort of reverse engineered that. I'll explain more how that actually works in the series if I ever talk about it there, but yeah, that's how I reverse engineered it. And from there, based on the understanding I gained from knowing how sine wave works and now understanding how square wave works and this whole frequency counter nonsense, I could implement methods for saw wave, which is based on that, and triangle wave. Saw wave, pretty much my own design. Triangle wave, I started with something from the internet and did some algebra based on what I did with saw wave, because this wasn't quite what I was going for. And there, that gave me an appropriate triangle wave. And that's really all there is to it, so I reverse engineered sine, square, and triangle. So just for fun, here's me playing around with this, because I do a lot of playing around with sine wave. I figured out that if you combine them in a certain way, it makes that stereotypical alien ship hovering in the air sound. Other than that, I just did some basic harmony. Yeah, this is playing the notes A an octave higher, and E, which, if you know music, you might know that makes a power chord. So, fun fact of the day if you didn't know that. I just played all my different waves with that to make sure they're harmonically correct. Because they should be, if my synthesis algorithms are working correctly. So yeah, and that's how I figured out, yeah, this stuff is feasible too. So I've proven 2 things are feasible. What now? Do I prove more stuff is feasible? I could, and I might, depending on what I'm doing. But something you might have noticed is I'm not really coding in a very organized fashion here. I'm just sort of throwing in whatever works, whatever I need to test and prove it works. And there's a reason for this. If I just immediately started creating the perfect, brilliant architecture for my final goal, well, a lot of that stuff's probably not going to prove to be feasible or work in the way I expect. So then I didn't end up needing to throw out the whole thing and do it again. So that's why I do it the way I do it. I try and prove a few things that are easy to prove are feasible. In this case, the audio file and basic synthesis, because at this point this is enough that I can make a basic audio system. I can architect a system that works well for playing audio files and maybe generating basic wave forms, like saw waves and whatnot. And then from there, hopefully it won't be too hard to scale that up into adding on to the architecture for more advanced things, like, I don't know, like playing multiple audio files at once, and other things I might be interested in doing. And that's the next thing I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be creating an architecture that can make a more reasonable piece of software that can do this. And yeah, that's really where my process is right now. So, hope you enjoyed. Hope you found that interesting. So, thank you. If you found this interesting, let me know. Maybe I'll do a few more of these. And next time, hopefully the next video I do will be something of the Dare engine, some sort of live stream for that, because I've been meaning to get around to that. I haven't for whatever reason. So yeah, hope you enjoyed, hope you learned, and I'll see you then.